All right, ready to dive in. We've got a mountain of intel here, government docs, news articles, the whole shebang. And it's all geared towards helping you absolutely crush those UPSC prelims.
Sounds intense.
Oh, it is. But it's also fascinating. We're talking about everything from international relations and those crazy government shakeups to the newest, coolest scientific discoveries, and even, believe it or not, the amazing world of amoebas.
Amoebas, huh? Oh, you know what they say. It's all connected.
Exactly. And speaking of connections, let's kick things off with governance, elections, and all that international relations drama. So, the recent election results have got everyone buzzing about coalition governments. What's your take?
Well, they can be a bit of a mixed bag, right? On the one hand, you've got the potential for more inclusive policymaking, which is great. But on the flip side, there's always that risk of instability. Like, remember what happened back in '98 when the first NDA government went kaput? History might be about to repeat itself, and that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, history repeating itself. Speaking of which, the demand for new states is back in the spotlight. Uttar Pradesh, for example. What's the deal with that?
Well, creating a new state, it's not exactly a walk in the park. There's a whole process, not to mention the potential headaches that come along with it. Look at the water sharing disputes that erupted after Telangana was born. It just goes to show you these decisions can have some serious ripple effects.
Definitely something to think about, especially for those prelims.
Right. It's a balancing act, you know? Regional aspirations on one side, national unity on the other. Classic UPSC dilemma.
And since we're on this history trip, let's not forget about the 1976 emergency. A pretty intense chapter in India's story, and it definitely left its mark on things like federalism and civil liberties.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the emergency, it led to some pretty significant changes in our Constitution, especially that 44th Amendment. It's like a roadmap, you know, for understanding how India's democracy evolved and the safeguards they put in place to protect individual rights. Crucial stuff for anyone trying to wrap their head around the Indian political system.
Okay, now for a total curveball. Proportional representation. Some say it's the answer to our first past-the-post system woes. Thoughts?
Well, with proportional representation, you're aiming for a system where the seats a party snags in an election, it actually reflects how many votes they got. Imagine that. It could totally shake up the political landscape, especially considering those 2024 election results. Definitely food for thought.
Food for thought, for sure. Okay, zooming out a bit, let's talk about India on the world stage. The relationship with Bangladesh is always intriguing, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, India and Bangladesh, we've got a lot in common. History, culture, we even share a river. But of course, there's always a little fiction in any close relationship, right?
Yeah.
The Teesta River dispute, that's a classic example. But then you've got these new initiatives like the cross-border UPI payments that are pushing things forward. It's a dynamic relationship, that's for sure, and a prime example of all the twists and turns of regional diplomacy.
Definitely a lot going on there. And speaking of global headaches, we can't forget about nuclear non-proliferation. Always a hot-button issue.
Well, you've got treaties like the CTBT and NPT. They're the cornerstone of the whole effort to keep those nukes from spreading. India's always had its own stance on these treaties. It's a delicate balancing act, considering the security concerns and the ever-changing threats in our backyard, especially with China and Pakistan always lurking in the background.
Yeah, can't ignore those guys. All right, last stop on our world tour, Italy. They seem to be getting pretty cozy with India lately.
Oh, yeah. Italy's been stepping up its game. They're all in on initiatives like the International Solar Alliance. It just goes to show you, in this day and age, international partnerships are key if you want to tackle those big global challenges. Something to watch out for.
Definitely worth noting. Okay, enough globetrotting for now. Let's talk money. The economy's been making headlines with those recent changes to priority sector lending norms. What's the big deal?
Well, those changes have a direct impact on who gets loans. Think agriculture, MSMEs. It's all about making credit more accessible, which is essential if you want the economy to thrive. But the devil's in the details, you know. Understanding how those norms work, how they might affect banks' lending habits, and what it means for the overall financial picture, that's the real challenge.
Yeah, the financial world can be a bit of a maze sometimes. Speaking of mazes, let's talk about those finfluencers, the financial influencers who've basically taken over social media. What's your take on this whole phenomenon?
They've definitely shaken things up in the financial advice arena, no doubt about it, but with all that influence comes responsibility, right? And that's why you've got SEBI cracking down, trying to address concerns about transparency and potential conflicts of interest. It's like a constant game of catch-up. Technology leaps forward, and regulations are always scrambling to keep pace.
It's incredible how fast they've gained the trust of millions, especially those young investors. But isn't there a risk of misinformation?
Oh, absolutely. It's a double-edged sword, that's for sure. On the one hand, they can make financial knowledge more accessible, which is great. But on the other hand, it's easy to mislead those who aren't exactly financial wizards. The key takeaway here: always be critical of financial advice, no matter who's dishing it out.
Sound advice.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch gears again. India's workforce is a hot topic these days. We've got this massive demographic advantage, a young and energetic population.
Right, right. India's got the potential to be a global powerhouse when it comes to talent. But to unlock that potential, we've got to address some serious challenges. Skill development, brain drain. These are issues we can't afford to ignore. It's a complex equation, really, with both risks and opportunities that need careful consideration.
Speaking of tricky situations, India's trade deficit has been making headlines, hasn't it? What's the latest on that front?
The trade deficit, it basically boils down to the difference between what India imports and what we export. And right now, the gap's widening. The demand for coal is shooting up, despite all our efforts to embrace renewable energy. It's a classic example of the challenges we face in trying to balance economic growth with environmental sustainability. Definitely something to keep in mind, especially for those prelims.
Right, sustainability is a big one these days. Okay, let's zoom in on a government scheme that aims to tackle a very basic need: housing. Tell us about the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, PMAY.
PMAY, it's a flagship scheme with some ambitious goals: affordable housing for everyone, understanding its ins and outs, the achievements so far, even nitty-gritty details like how much assistance folks get in different regions.
Right.
That's the kind of deep knowledge that can make all the difference in your exam.
Yeah, the details matter. All right, let's move on to an area where India is making some serious waves: science and technology.
Oh, absolutely. India is making some incredible strides in science and tech. We're about to dive into some seriously groundbreaking discoveries and innovations, fascinating stuff that has the potential to shape the future.
Well, let's dive in then. First up, we've got a topic that's heating things up, literally. There's this growing debate about whether heat waves should officially be recognized as disasters.
Heat waves, they're becoming more frequent, more intense, and their impact is undeniable. Classifying them as disasters would unlock a whole new level of resources and strategies for dealing with them. It's a crucial discussion, reflecting just how much our climate is changing and how we need to adapt our thinking.
Definitely a sign of the times. And now for some good news. Let's take a moment to celebrate Sub-Lieutenant Anamika B. Rajav, the Indian Navy's first woman helicopter pilot. That's incredible.
It's a phenomenal achievement, no doubt. It marks a real turning point in the armed forces and shows just how much women are breaking down those barriers and proving their incredible talent and determination.
Okay, ready for something a little more explosive. Scientists in the Philippines have observed this phenomenon called cold lava, or lahar.
It's fascinating, really. Lahar, it's this superheated slurry of volcanic debris and water, and it can be incredibly destructive. It may not be molten lava, but trust me, it can be just as dangerous. It's a stark reminder of just how unpredictable volcanoes can be and how crucial it is to understand those geological processes, to keep ourselves safe.
It's like Mother Nature's throwing a curveball. Okay, next we're going microscopic. Scientists have discovered 40, count them, 40 new pneumoviruses using artificial intelligence.
Pneumoviruses, they're a fascinating bunch with these large genomes and potential links to human health. Uncovering these new viruses using AI, that's a remarkable feat, and it opens up so many avenues for research and understanding potential threats. It also shows how technology is revolutionizing the way we do science, which is pretty exciting.
It's like AI is giving us a whole new lens to view the world, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
and that's incredibly powerful.
And finally, for this segment, we've got a breakthrough in the world of biotechnology: the mass production of recombinant proteins at ISK Bangalore. What's the big deal here?
Recombinant proteins, they're like the building blocks of so many things: medicine, agriculture, you name it. This breakthrough could be a game changer, making these proteins more readily available and hopefully more affordable. It's a testament to India's growing expertise in biotechnology. We're definitely ones to watch in that field.
It's incredible how far we've come. All right, that was a whirlwind tour of just a taste of what we'll be covering today. So buckle up, folks, because in our next segment, we'll be diving even deeper into the fascinating discoveries, challenges, and opportunities facing India today. Stay tuned.
Now, from the cutting edge of science, let's turn to something that's been causing a lot of stress and anxiety. The controversy swirling around those big public exams like NEET UG and UGC Net.
It's tough to see students going through that. All that pressure to perform is one thing, but then you add those anxieties about security breaches and potential unfair practices. It's just, well, It's heartbreaking.
The sheer scale of those exams is mind-boggling, isn't it? Millions of students, countless exam papers. It's a logistical nightmare. And then on top of that, you've got the challenge of keeping things fair and square, preventing malpractice. Those recent incidents have really exposed some vulnerabilities in the system. It's clear that we need a multi-pronged solution here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
You can't just slap a Band-Aid on a problem this complex. What needs to happen? What are we looking at?
Well, we need to tackle it from all angles. Think strengthening those security protocols, boosting transparency, making sure there's a fair and efficient process for addressing complaints, the whole 9 yards. But, and this is crucial, we can't forget the human side of this. The toll these controversies take on students' mental health is real.
It's a good reminder that academic achievement shouldn't come at the expense of well-being, right? Speaking of well-being, that recent hooch tragedy in Tamil Nadu is a stark reminder of just how dangerous illicit liquor can be.
It's a tragedy, for sure. Understanding what hooch is and why it's so dangerous, that's crucial. Those toxic substances like methanol, they can have devastating consequences. Blindness, organ failure, even death. It's a grim reality.
It's a complex issue, isn't it? You've got poverty, limited access to safe alcohol. It's a web of interconnected factors. So what can we do? How do we prevent these tragedies from happening?
Well, clamping down on the production and distribution of methanol, that's got to be a priority. Stricter regulations, that's a start. But the challenge, as always, is enforcement. We need a multifaceted approach here. You've got to combine law enforcement with public awareness campaigns and those social interventions that can actually make a difference at the grassroots level.
Yeah, it's got to be a holistic approach. Okay, shifting gears to something a bit more positive, let's talk about healthcare.
Yeah.
Specifically, the National Health Claim Exchange, or NHCX. It's being hailed as a potential game changer.
NHCX, it's going to revolutionize how we deal with health insurance claims, that's for sure. Imagine a digital platform that connects everyone, insurance companies, healthcare providers, even those government schemes. Seamless, efficient, that's the goal. It's about empowering patients, reducing those out-of-pocket expenses, and just streamlining the whole process.
It sounds like a giant leap toward achieving universal healthcare in India. What a concept. But what about the practical side of things? Implementing something this big, there's got to be some hurdles, right?
Oh, absolutely. Interoperability is key. We need to make sure that NHCX can seamlessly integrate with those existing systems. And of course, data security and privacy, those are non-negotiables. You've got to build trust in the system, and that means transparency, accountability, and those robust safeguards to protect sensitive patient information.
Makes sense. Okay, let's talk about a resource that's becoming increasingly precious: water. Delhi, in particular, seems to be facing a real crisis.
Delhi's water woes, it's like a perfect storm, really. You've got natural limitations, that booming population, and let's face it, some mismanagement along the way. The city relies heavily on those external sources, like the Yamuna and the Ravi Bees rivers, and groundwater's being sucked dry. And then climate change throws another wrench into the works, with erratic rainfall and scorching summers.
It's a tough situation. So what's the solution? What can we do to turn the tide?
We've got to hit this problem from all sides. Think conservation measures, smarter water management practices, even investing in those alternative sources like rainwater harvesting. We need to start treating water like the precious resource it is and take those proactive steps to ensure we've got enough for everyone.
Wise words. Okay, shifting gears again, I've heard some talk about setting up a dedicated bank just for MSMEs. What's the thinking behind that?
Well, those MSMEs, they're the backbone of the economy, right? But they often hit a wall trying to get loans from those traditional banks. The lending criteria can be pretty tough. A specialized bank, one that's tailored to their needs, that could be a game changer. Think more flexible financing options. It could really fuel growth and innovation in that vital sector.
A bank just for MSMEs, huh? That's an interesting concept. What about the ownership structure? Would it be a public thing, private, or a mix?
That's one of the big questions, right? They're tossing around a few ideas, a hybrid model, maybe a public-private partnership, something like that, could leverage the expertise of both sides. It'll be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. All right, let's get back to the world of finance for a moment. SEBI has been busy cracking down on finfluencers and rolling out those new rules for delisting. What's the deal with that?
Well, it's all about cleaning up the market, increasing transparency and accountability. Finfluencers, they've definitely made a splash, but it's created this need for some ground rules. Got to protect those investors, especially the newbies who might not know the ropes. We need to make sure everyone's playing fair and that no one's getting fleeced.
It's like the Wild West out there sometimes, with all that financial advice flying around. It's good to see some order being imposed. What about those new delisting rules? What's the gist of those?
Well, they're trying to simplify things, make the whole process smoother, more transparent, all that good stuff. Think a fixed price mechanism for those frequently traded shares, a clear framework for delisting those investment and holding companies. It's all about leveling the playing field.
Level playing field, that's key. All right, let's talk about something that's fundamental to the whole global trade game, the balance of payments. What exactly is that?
It's basically a record of all the economic transactions between a country and the rest of the world. Everything's in there trading goods and services, investments, financial flows. It's like a snapshot of how a country interacts with the global economy.
And key part of that is the current account, right? What's that all about?
Exactly. That's the one that tracks the flow of goods, services, and income. And, India's current account has been causing a bit of a stir lately because our trade deficit is widening.
Meaning we're importing more than we're exporting, right?
You got it. And
Yeah.
that can have some ripple effects on a country's currency, foreign exchange reserves, and even overall economic stability. Policymakers need to keep a close eye on that.
Okay, let's shift focus to a sector that's vital for India agriculture. I've been hearing about this new method of rice cultivation called direct seeding of rice, or DSR. What's the story with that?
DSR, it's like a shortcut. Instead of going through the whole rigmarole of preparing nurseries and transplanting those seedlings, farmers just sow those pre-germinated seeds straight into the field. Saves water, cuts down on labor, even leads to a faster harvest.
Sounds pretty efficient. Are there any downsides to DSR? What's the catch?
Well, like any farming technique, it's got its quirks. You need to be on top of things, especially when it comes to those pesky weeds. Plus, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's not ideal for all soil types or climates. But overall, it's a promising technique with the potential to make rice production more efficient and conserve those precious resources.
Sounds like a win-win.
Okay.
Let's talk about a program that aims to boost India's global trade game, the Authorized Economic Operator Program. What's that all about?
It's like a VIP club for businesses that play by the rules. Those companies that meet certain security and compliance standards, they get certified and bam, they've got access to all these perks. Faster customs clearance, fewer inspections, priority treatment. It's a win-win for everyone. It makes trade operations smoother, safer, and more efficient.
So it's about streamlining trade while maintaining high standards. Smart approach. All right, let's talk about a concept that's at the heart of many business partnerships, revenue sharing. What's the deal with that?
Well, it's all about collaboration. Two or more parties come together, they agree to split the revenue from a venture, and everyone shares in both the risks and the rewards. It fosters this sense of partnership, which is always a good thing in business.
It's not just about taking a slice of the pie, it's about baking a bigger pie together, right?
Exactly. And revenue sharing, it's incredibly versatile. It can be applied to so many different business models, franchising, joint ventures. The possibilities are endless. It's a powerful tool for fostering collaboration and sparking innovation.
Innovation, that's what it's all about. Okay, let's talk about an investment vehicle that's been gaining a lot of traction in India. Mutual funds. What's the lowdown on those?
Mutual funds, they're like a gateway to the investment world, even for those who don't have a ton of cash to throw around. You pool your money with other investors, and a team of experts manages it for you, spreading the risk across a bunch of different assets.
So even small investors can benefit from professional management and diversification. That's pretty cool.
Absolutely. And the mutual fund industry in India, it's booming. It's a sign that more and more people are becoming financially savvy and looking for ways to grow their wealth. There's even talk of SEBI allowing domestic mutual funds to invest in those overseas funds, which could open up even more opportunities for diversification and growth.
No, that's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that unfolds.
Yeah.
So let's talk about something that's always fascinated humankind: gold.
Gold, the ultimate symbol of wealth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Central banks around the world, they hoard it like it's going out of style. And guess what? The Reserve Bank of India, they're one of the biggest gold hoarders out there.
Really? I always wondered, where do they keep all that gold? I mean, do they have some giant vault hidden somewhere?
They do have vaults in India for sure, but a good chunk of it is actually stored overseas, those major financial hubs, London, New York.
Overseas? Really? Why is that?
Well, think about it. It's strategic. It's about security, being close to those global gold markets, even diversifying those geopolitical risks. It makes it easier to trade and tap into those markets when they need to. It's all about managing that valuable asset wisely.
Smart move. All right, let's talk about something that aims to shake up the e-commerce landscape in India, the Open Network for Digital Commerce, or ONDC. What's the buzz about?
ONDC, it's like a breath of fresh air in the e-commerce world. It's this network that allows buyers and sellers to connect directly, no matter what platform they're using.
So it's about breaking down those walls between different e-commerce giants and fostering more competition.
Exactly. The goal is to empower those smaller businesses, give consumers more choices, and just inject some much-needed innovation into the e-commerce ecosystem.
Sounds promising. But what are the challenges? What might throw a wrench into the works?
Interoperability, that's a big one. We need those different platforms and systems to talk to each other seamlessly. And just like with that NHCX thing, building trust with consumers is crucial. Data security and privacy, those are going to be top of mind for everyone.
For sure. Speaking of trust, sometimes dealing with banks can be a real headache. Tell us about that bank clinic thing launched by the All India Bank Employees Association.
Think of it as a virtual help desk for all your banking woes. You can get guidance and support on anything banking related. Complaints, issues, anything. It's all about empowering customers and giving them clear, concise information about their rights and options.
That's like having your own personal banking advocate. I like it.
Right. It's all about making banking more accessible and user-friendly.
Now, let's zoom out for a moment and talk about a key indicator of a country's economic health external debt. What exactly does that mean?
External debt, it's basically the money a country owes to those foreign creditors. A certain level of external debt is normal, especially for a growing economy like India's. But if it balloons out of control, that's when alarm bells start ringing.
So it's like taking out a mortgage, right? It can be manageable if you've got a steady income. But if your finances are stretched thin, it can become a real burden.
Perfect analogy. It's all about managing that debt responsibly, making sure those borrowed funds are being used for productive investments that benefit the economy in the long run.
Makes sense. All right, let's talk about a challenge that affects everyone around the world, unemployment.
Unemployment, it's a tough issue. It's linked to poverty, social unrest, even a slowdown in overall economic activity. It's a complex problem with no easy answers.
And to make matters worse, the International Labor Organization is predicting that global unemployment is going to remain stubbornly high for the next few years. Not exactly a rosy picture.
It's definitely concerning. And it's not just about the number of jobs out there. It's about the quality of those jobs. So many people are stuck in those low-paying gigs with no security, no benefits. The pandemic, it only made things worse, you know?
So what's the solution? Where do we go from here?
We need a multi-pronged approach, that's for sure. Invest in creating good-paying jobs, provide those skills development programs, and establish those social safety nets to catch those who fall through the cracks. This isn't something one country can solve on its own. Governments, businesses, international organizations, we all need to work together to create a more inclusive and sustainable global economy.
We're all in this together, right? Okay, let's talk infrastructure for a bit. What's the deal with those infrastructure investment trusts? Those NVITs I've been hearing about.
NVITs, they're an interesting way for investors to get in on those big infrastructure projects. It's like owning a tiny piece of a highway or power grid.
So even regular folks can contribute to building the nation's infrastructure.
Exactly. And for those infrastructure developers, it's a great way to raise funds, monetize those existing assets, free up capital for those new projects. It's a win-win that can really accelerate infrastructure development in India.
Sounds like a smart move. Okay, what about those clearing corporations? What role do they play in the financial world?
They're like the referees of the financial market. They act as intermediaries in those transactions, making sure that trades are settled efficiently and everyone does what they're supposed to do. They're all about keeping things fair, orderly, and minimizing risk.
So they help maintain stability in the financial system. It's good to have someone keeping an eye on things, especially in a world that can be as volatile as finance.
Absolutely. And Sebi, they've been working to strengthen the rules for those clearing corporations, focusing on those ownership and governance structures. It's all about increasing transparency, holding them accountable, and ultimately protecting investors and the entire financial system.
Speaking of financial instruments, let's talk about something that can be alluring and risky, those derivatives.
Derivatives, they're like bets on the future, Their value is tied to an underlying asset, like a stock or a commodity. They can be useful for hedging, managing risk, but they can also be pretty speculative.
Sounds a bit like a high-stakes game.
It can be, that's for sure. And that's why the NSE issued that warning to those retail investors. Tread carefully. Derivatives, they're complex instruments. You need to understand how those financial markets work and how to manage risk, or you could get burned.
Sound advice. All right, let's turn our attention to a sector that's vital for food security, fisheries, and aquaculture.
Fish, it's a crucial source of protein for millions around the globe. And global fish production, it's booming. And a big part of that is aquaculture, the controlled cultivation of those aquatic organisms.
So it's like farming, but for fish.
You got it. Aquaculture has become a major player in meeting the global demand for seafood, but we got to be mindful of the environmental impact. Sustainable practices are essential to protect our oceans and make sure this is a resource we can rely on for the long haul.
Sustainability is key, always. Okay, let's talk about a government scheme that's designed to support farmers. The Pradhan Mantri Annadata Aay Sanrakshana PM Asha. What's the deal with that one?
PM Awash, it's a triple threat when it comes to protecting farmers. It's got three main components: the price support scheme, the price deficiency payment scheme, and the private procurement and stockist scheme.
Sounds like a comprehensive approach to ensuring farmers get a fair price for their hard work.
Exactly. It's all about stabilizing prices, compensating farmers for losses, and encouraging those private players to get involved in procurement and storage. A stable agriculture sector is a win for everyone.
Absolutely.
Right.
Now let's talk about something that often gets overlooked, but plays a huge role in food security, those post-harvest losses. What are we talking about here?
It's the food that disappears before it even reaches our plates. That reduction in quantity and quality that happens between harvest and consumption.
So it's like the food is shrinking before our very eyes.
In a way, yeah. And in India, those losses can be substantial, especially for those perishable items like fruits and vegetables.
What are the main culprits behind these losses? What's causing all this food to go to waste?
Think poor storage facilities, lousy transportation infrastructure, and inefficient processing techniques. It's a fixable problem. We need to invest in better infrastructure, streamline those supply chains, and adopt technologies that can reduce spoilage and waste. It's all about making sure that food actually reaches the people who need it.
Right. No point in producing food if it never makes it to the table. Okay, shifting gears to the world of shipping. I've heard about a ranking that measures the efficiency of container ports, the Container Port Performance Index, CPPI. What's that all about?
It's like a report card for ports. It looks at all sorts of factors: how
Yeah.
quickly they handle those ships, how efficient they are at moving cargo, what kind of infrastructure they have. It's a great way to benchmark performance and identify areas where ports can step up their game.
So how do Indian ports stack up against the rest of the world?
We've made some progress, for sure, but there's always room for improvement. Think modernization, streamlining processes, embracing those digital tools. It's about creating those world-class gateways for global trade.
That's the goal, right? Make India a global trade hub. All right, let's take a moment to commemorate a significant anniversary, the 25th anniversary of the Kargil War.
The Kargil War, it was a defining moment for India, a testament to the courage and sacrifice of our armed forces. Those brave soldiers, they fought in some of the most treacherous terrain imaginable, high up in the Himalayas.
A conflict that tested our resolve and showed the world what India is made of.
And we emerged victorious, but not without a heavy price. The Kargil War is a reminder that freedom isn't free. Those soldiers, they made the ultimate sacrifice. And it's a reminder to all of us that we need to be vigilant, always prepared to defend our nation.
A lesson we should never forget. Okay, let's talk about something that outlines a nation's strategic vision. The National Security Strategy. What's that all about?
Think of it as a blueprint, you know? It lays out a country's core security interests, the threats it faces, and the strategies to address those threats. It's like a roadmap for navigating that complex and ever-changing world of national security.
And there's been some talk in India about putting our national security strategy into a formal document, right?
Yeah, there's a debate brewing on that front. Some folks argue that a formal document would bring clarity, consistency, and accountability to our security policymaking, and it would signal to the world what our priorities are.
But wouldn't that make us more predictable, to those who might not have our best interests at heart?
That's the counter-argument. The other side says that India's security environment is just too fluid, too complex to be neatly captured in a rigid document. They think maintaining some strategic ambiguity is key when you're dealing with so many unpredictable challenges.
It's a tough call. Speaking of tough challenges, cyberspace is becoming increasingly important in today's world.
Cyberspace, it's the new battleground. Nations around the world are racing to develop their cyber capabilities, both for offense and defense. And India, we're not sitting on the sidelines.
Right. There's talk about a new joint doctrine for cyberspace operations. What's that all about?
It's all about coordinating those cyber capabilities across the Army, Navy, and Air Force. It lays out the principles, strategies, procedures for both offensive and defensive cyber operations. It's making sure that India's cyber forces are ready to deter and respond to any cyber attacks, protect our critical infrastructure, and maintain national security in the digital age.
It's like setting the rules of engagement for this new domain of warfare. Okay, enough about the digital world for a moment. Let's talk about something a bit more tangible, those aircraft carriers, those symbols of naval power.
Aircraft carriers are like floating fortresses, projecting power across the seas and skies.
They're impressive, that's for sure.
India's always understood the strategic importance of aircraft carriers, you know? They're essential for safeguarding our maritime interests. There's even been talk about building a third carrier to make sure we've got the firepower to meet those evolving challenges in the Indo-Pacific region.
That's a big decision. Building an aircraft carrier, that's not exactly cheap. What are the main factors to consider when making that call?
Well, cost is definitely a big one. Those things are expensive to build and operate. And then there are the technical aspects. What kind of propulsion system? What aircraft will it carry? And of course, you've got to weigh the strategic rationale. What are the threats? What are our goals? The Indo-Pacific, it's becoming a more and more complex security environment. You've got China flexing its muscles, other regional players making their moves. It's a complex equation.
Lots of moving pieces, for sure. All right, let's switch gears again and talk about a field that's vital to the justice system, forensic science. What's the latest on that front?
Forensic science, it's all about using those scientific principles to gather and analyze evidence. It's like solving a puzzle, but with much higher stakes.
And the government's been making some moves to bolster those forensic science capabilities in India, right?
Oh, yeah. They've greenlit this new scheme for modernization and expansion. The goal is to set up those new forensic labs, upgrade existing ones, and provide better training and capacity building. It's all about making sure those forensic experts have the tools and resources they need to do their job effectively.
It's about making sure that our justice system is built on solid scientific foundations.
Precisely. Better forensic science means better evidence, faster investigations, and a higher conviction rate. It's all about making our legal system more just and more effective.
Makes sense. All right, let's talk about an international organization that's on the front lines of combating financial crimes. The Financial Action Task Force, FATF. What's their role?
Think of them as the financial watchdog of the world. They set the standards, promote measures to combat money laundering, terrorist financing, all those threats to the integrity of the global financial system.
So they're like the financial police, keeping an eye on shady dealings and cracking down on those who try to game the system.
That's a good way to put it. And India, we've been active members of the FATF, working to strengthen those global efforts. In fact, the FATF recently gave India a pat on the back, acknowledging the progress we've made in combating money laundering and terrorist financing. They highlighted our robust framework and those effective measures we've implemented.
It's good to be recognized for our efforts on the global stage. Okay, let's dive into a specific legal provision that's been generating some controversy. Section 45 of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, or PMLA.
Section 45, it's all about bail for those accused of money laundering. It's a tough provision, and it's been challenged for being too harsh, potentially infringing on some fundamental rights.
What are the main points of contention? What are people arguing about?
Well, critics say that the requirements for getting bail under Section 45 are so strict that even innocent people might have a hard time meeting them. They argue it creates this presumption of guilt, and it makes it practically impossible to get out on bail.
But wouldn't relaxing those requirements make it easier for criminals to skip town?
That's the other side of the argument, right? Those who support the provision say that these tough bail conditions are necessary to keep money launderers in check. They argued that without these safeguards, those accused could easily flee or tamper with evidence.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it?
Right.
Protecting individual rights while ensuring justice is served. Okay, let's talk about the Indian Army for a moment. What's the role of the Chief of the Army Staff? What do they do?
They're the top dog, the highest-ranking officer in the entire Indian Army, responsible for command, control, administration, the whole shebang.
It's a huge responsibility.
Oh, absolutely. And when there's a new chief of the Army staff, that's a big deal. It marks a shift in leadership, sets the direction for the Army's future. They typically serve for 3 years, or until they hit 62, whichever comes first. It's a system that promotes continuity and stability.
Stability is important, especially in a role like that. All right, let's talk about a citizen science initiative in Kerala. The Monsoon Croaks BioBlitz. What's that all about?
It's a fantastic way for regular folks to contribute to scientific research. They encourage people to go out there during the monsoon season, observe those frogs and toads, and record their findings on this app called iNaturalist.
So it's like a crowdsourced effort to map those amphibians.
Exactly. And all that data they're collecting is incredibly valuable for researchers. They can track those amphibian populations, their distribution, abundance, health. It all helps us understand the state of our ecosystems.
Speaking of ecosystems, we've talked about cold lava before.
Mm.
That lahar stuff is pretty fascinating and pretty dangerous.
It's like a volcanic mudslide, you know? This mix of volcanic debris and water that comes rushing down those slopes, heavy rainfall, melting glaciers, that's what usually triggers it.
And it can bury entire towns, right?
Yeah.
Some serious damage.
Oh, yeah. It's a force of nature you don't want to mess with. If you're living in a volcanic region, understanding those triggers and potential lahar path is crucial for staying safe. It's all about hazard mitigation and disaster preparedness.
Staying safe, that's the key. All right, let's talk about an international agreement that's crucial for protecting our oceans, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS.
UNCLOS, it's like the rule book for the oceans. It sets up the legal framework for how we use and manage our oceans and those precious resources. It covers everything: navigation, environmental protection, fishing limits, territorial waters. It's a pretty big deal.
Sounds like it.
It's all about striking that balance, you know? National interests on one hand, international cooperation on the other. One of the key concepts in UNCLOS is the Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ. Coastal states get sovereign rights over the resources within 200 nautical miles of their shores.
So it's like each country gets a slice of the ocean pie.
Exactly. They get to explore, exploit, conserve, manage those living and non-living resources within their EEs.
Speaking of managing resources, let's talk about the Green Climate Fund. What's their role in tackling climate change?
The Green Climate Fund, or GCF, it's like a global piggy bank for climate action. It supports developing countries in their efforts to mitigate and adapt to those climate changes.
So it's helping those countries that are most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change.
Exactly. They provide grants, loans, all sorts of financial instruments to help those countries reduce emissions and build resilience. It's a vital tool in the global fight against climate change.
Absolutely. Okay, let's revisit a region we've talked about before, the Hindu Kush Himalaya.
The Hindu Kush Himalaya, sometimes called the third pole because of all those massive glaciers. But those glaciers are in trouble. Climate change is causing them to melt at an alarming rate.
And that's bad news for millions of people who depend on those rivers that originate in the Himalayas.
Exactly. And it's not just about water, you know? The Hindu Kush Himalaya, it's a biodiversity hotspot, home to unique cultures all facing the impacts of climate change. We're talking glacial lake outburst floods, landslides, changes in agricultural patterns. It's a complex web of challenges. The International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, ICIMOD, they've been monitoring those changes, providing valuable data. Their work is a wake-up call. We need to address climate change and adopt sustainable development strategies, especially in those fragile mountain ecosystems.
For sure. Okay, let's talk about a species that needs our help, the greater adjutant stork.
There are these incredible birds found in South and Southeast Asia, but sadly, they're facing a tough time habitat loss, hunting, poisoning. In India, they're considered endangered.
It's sad to think that a creature like that could disappear.
It is, but there's still hope. In Assam, there are organizations like Aranyak and the Bombay Natural History Society. They're working tirelessly to protect these birds. They're raising awareness, safeguarding nesting sites, even getting those local communities involved.
That's inspiring. Okay, for something a bit more cheerful, let's talk about a discovery in Kerala, a new species of bioluminescent mushroom.
This new species, Philobolides manipularis, they found it in the forests of Kasaragod district, and it glows. It emits this bright green light at night.
Sounds magical. How does it do that?
It's called bioluminescence, and it's all about a chemical reaction within the mushroom cells. The details are still a bit of a mystery, but it's a reminder of just how much wonder there is in the natural world.
Speaking of wonder, scientists have also discovered a new species of caecilian in Kerala.
Caecilians, they're a fascinating bunch. Limbless amphibians, they kind of look like worms or snakes. This new species, it's got these distinctive yellow stripes, and it's a reminder that we're still discovering new species, even in places we thought we knew pretty well.
There's always something new to discover. Okay, let's dive back into the microscopic world for a moment. Scientists have discovered 40 new nidoviruses using AI.
40! That's incredible! Nidoviruses, they're those RNA viruses known for their large genomes and complex ways of replicating. using AI to uncover those. Nidoviruses, they're those RNA viruses, known for their large genomes and complex ways of replicating. Using AI to uncover those new viruses is a game changer. It opens up all sorts of new research possibilities.
It's amazing how technology is revolutionizing scientific discovery, isn't it? So what are the implications of finding all these new viruses? Should we be worried?
Well, some nidoviruses have been linked to human diseases, so studying these new ones is crucial. We need to understand potential threats and figure out how to prevent them. It's all about staying ahead of the curve.
Being proactive, that's key.
Yeah.
Speaking of breakthroughs, researchers at the Indian Institute of Science have developed a new method for mass-producing those recombinant proteins. What's the significance of that?
Recombinant proteins, they're essential for so many things. Medicine, agriculture, you name it. This new technique could make production much more efficient, making these proteins more readily available and hopefully more affordable. It's a great example of India's growing expertise in biotechnology.
Fantastic news. Okay, let's talk about a drug that's been making headlines lately, hydroxyurea. What's the deal with that?
Hydroxyurea, it's used to treat a variety of conditions, including certain types of cancer and sickle cell disease. It's been particularly effective in reducing those painful episodes that people with sickle cell disease experience.
How does it work? What's the mechanism there?
It boosts the production of fetal hemoglobin. You know, the type of hemoglobin that babies have in the womb. It usually declines after birth, but it's less likely to sickle than adult hemoglobin. So by increasing fetal hemoglobin levels, hydroxyurea helps prevent those sickle cells from forming and reduces the severity of the symptoms.
That's fascinating. It's amazing how we can manipulate those biological processes to treat diseases. Okay, let's talk about a scientific tool that's revolutionized biological research, reverse transcriptase.
Reverse transcriptase, it's an enzyme, and it does something really cool. It can make DNA from an RNA template. It's like going back in time, from RNA to DNA.
That's a great way to put it. It's like rewinding the genetic code.
Exactly. And this enzyme, it has a ton of applications, from basic research to those diagnostic tests they use in medicine.
Speaking of exciting advancements, let's talk about the Trishan satellite, a joint mission between India and France.
Trishan, it stands for Thermal Infrared Imaging Satellite for High-Resolution Natural Resource Assessment. It's like a giant infrared camera in space.
Cool. What will it be used for?
All sorts of things. It'll provide valuable data for agriculture, water management, even disaster response. It's all about getting a better picture of our planet, literally.
A bird's eye view, but with infrared vision. Okay, let's discuss a technology that has the potential to change entire species. Those gene drives. What's the deal with those?
Gene drives, they're genetic elements that can spread through a population like wildfire. Even if they don't give any survival advantage, it's like a genetic hack. And they can be used for some pretty amazing things. Controlling those disease-carrying insects, wiping out invasive species, the possibilities are huge.
Sounds powerful, but also a bit scary, right?
Yeah, there are definitely concerns about unintended consequences and those ethical considerations. We need to be very careful with this technology.
Power and responsibility. Always two sides of the same coin. Okay, let's talk about a study that sheds some light on the evolution of altruism.
Altruism, it's that selfless behavior that benefits others, even at a cost to yourself. It's kind of a puzzle, right? How could such a trait evolve if it seems to go against natural selection?
Yeah, it's counterintuitive. But this study, using amoebas, provided some clues.
They found that amoebas with a specific gene were more likely to cooperate, even if it meant sacrificing their own reproductive success. It suggests that altruism can evolve, especially when it benefits close relatives who share those same genes.
So it's like they're willing to take one for the team, but only if it's their family team.
Exactly. It makes evolutionary sense. Now, let's talk about a common ingredient in all those sugar-free goodies that might not be as harmless as we thought: xylitol.
Xylitol, I thought it was a safe alternative to sugar.
It generally is for most people, but a recent study raised some red flags about its potential effects on blood clotting.
Oh, that's not good.
It seems xylitol can increase platelet activation, which is a key step in blood clotting. So for folks who are already at risk for blood clots, it's something to be mindful of.
Good to know. Always good to stay informed. Okay, for something a bit lighter, did you know that there are craters on Mars named after Indian towns?
It's true. The International Astronomical Union, they've got a sense of humor. They've named Martian craters after places like Gwalior, Surat, even Thane.
That's pretty cool. It's like a little piece of India on Mars.
Speaking of space, they recently found a new type of bacteria on the International Space Station.
Bacteria in space. How did that get there?
This bacterium, Enterobacter buchandensis, it probably hitched a ride on those astronauts or some cargo. Bacteria are tough little critters. They can survive in the most extreme environments.
And is it harmful? Should those astronauts be worried?
Well, some strains of this bacterium can cause infections, but the one they found on the space station seems to be harmless. It's still an interesting discovery, though. It adds to our understanding of life in those extreme environments.
Space bugs. Okay, let's talk about a powerful language model that's been making waves in the tech world. Polym 2. What's that all about?
Polym 2, it's a large language model developed by Google, and it's pretty amazing. It can understand and generate human language with remarkable accuracy and fluency.
So it's like a super smart chatbot.
You could say that, can translate languages, write different types of creative content, answer your questions in an informative way. It's pretty versatile.
That's impressive. Now let's shift gears and talk about biodiesel production. I heard about a new super hydrophobic catalyst that could make biodiesel cheaper to produce. What's the deal with that?
Superhydrophobic materials, they repel water like it's their job, and this new catalyst takes advantage of that property. It's got this super hydrophobic surface that prevents water from messing with the biodiesel production process, makes it more efficient, more cost-effective.
Great news for the renewable energy sector. Oh, let's step back in time for a moment and talk about a significant landmark in India, that Central Hall of Parliament.
The Central Hall, it's that magnificent circular chamber inside Parliament House in New Delhi. It's been the stage for some of the most important moments in India's post-independence history.
I've always been fascinated by the history of that building. It's seen it all, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's where India's independence was declared back in 47. It's hosted countless joint sessions of Parliament, addresses by world leaders, all sorts of historic occasions. It's a symbol of India's democracy, its journey as a nation.
A powerful symbol. Okay, let's talk about a revered figure in Indian history, Kabir.
Kabir, that 15th century mystic poet and saint, revered by both Hindus and Muslims. His teachings transcended those religious boundaries. He emphasized the unity of all faiths and that direct experience of the divine.
His poetry is timeless, isn't it? It still resonates with people today.
Absolutely. Kabir's message of love, tolerance, spiritual liberation, it speaks to something deep within us, regardless of our background or beliefs.
Words to live by. Speaking of cultural treasures, the city of Kozhikode in Kerala has been designated a UNESCO City of Literature. What does that mean exactly?
Kozhikode, or Calicut, as some call it, has always had this vibrant cultural scene and a rich literary history. Think libraries, literary organizations, renowned writers. It's a fitting recognition of the city's contributions to the world of literature.
A well-deserved honor. Well, it seems like we've reached the end of our deep dive. We've covered so much ground: governance, science, culture, global challenges. It's been quite a journey.
It's amazing how all these threads connect, isn't it? It shows how interconnected our world truly is.
Absolutely. It's been an eye-opening experience, and I've learned so much. Thank you for sharing your expertise and insights.
My pleasure. Always happy to dive into these fascinating topics.
And to our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this deep dive as much as we have. Remember, staying informed is about more than just memorizing facts. It's about understanding the why behind the what. So keep exploring, keep asking questions, and never stop learning. Until next time.